everyone, and welcome into the Horse Racing Show. I'm Kenny Rice. If you're keeping score, this is episode 49. We thank all those for tuning in on whatever media outlet you are listening or watching us on.
There's a few.
How many are there, Thomas, Kenny?
Well, we've got Google Play, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, 93.9 in Louisville, and WVLK in Lexington.
Thank you for updating on that. It's Christmas time. Ben Chaffins, what are you getting?
That's a tough one, but hopefully a Happy New Year. That's what I'm hoping for.
All right, Scott Hall in lead guitar. Scott?
Peace on earth, goodwill toward men, man.
Thank you.
That's
Gosh,
it.
you hosted a beauty pageant once, didn't you?
Hanging
World
around you,
peace.
man, it's rubbed off.
I tell you what we want today, Hall of Fame jockey Jerry Bailey with his insight, especially on the future of racing and medication and the use of whips. Longtime friend of mine, he's a writer and a producer and a director, Billy Rapaport. He started the Breeders' Cup news feed years ago. What is that? Well, you want to stay tuned for that. And we'll also be talking about some rock and roll, I have a feeling. So later on the show, guys, get out the instruments. You may want to start playing. It is the Horse Racing Show. Jerry Bailey coming up right after this. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Horse Racing Show, episode 49, if you're counting. We had this gentleman on way back when we were getting started. He's been very helpful in keeping us going with his star power. He is the Hall of Fame jockey, the NBC broadcaster, Jerry Bailey. Jerry, welcome back.
Merry Christmas, Kenny. How you doing, buddy?
Good. Merry Christmas. And do you do anything special, you and your lovely wife, Susie, and son, Justin, over the holidays? Is there a Bailey family tradition?
If you walk up to our house, like you're at the North Pole. So this is my wife's favorite holiday, and she decorates the house accordingly.
Do you help?
Well, I bring the stuff. Yeah, I get the stuff down and bring it to her. I put up the tree, and that's about it, Kenny. She does the rest.
Well, that's good enough. That's good enough. I was thinking because in the season, we know horse racing's year-round, but there is a little bit of a break for horse racing this time of year. I know there's still races going on, but you have a little bit of jockeys, trainers have a little downtime usually right now.
Yeah, when I rode, initially I rode through all the holidays, and they had racing on Christmas down here, believe it or not.
Yeah.
Down in South Florida. I rode on Christmas many times. But, yeah, I guess once I'd ridden about 15 years or so, my wife said, listen, let's just take off Christmas if you don't mind. So I started taking off actually almost the entire month of December until I reached about 40, 42 years old, and then I couldn't take that much time off without losing a lot of timing. So I would just ride weekends through December, but it was an easier month definitely for me as a jockey.
You mentioned timing. I don't know how many people realize it's just like a batter that's had some time off and hasn't stepped to the plate in a while. Timing's so important in horse racing for the jockey.
Yeah, it is. I mean, people don't realize that you've got to calculate and you got to figure out how long it's going to take you to get to a certain hole that might open and only be open for you for a matter of, 2 or 3/5 of a second. And if you don't ride, at least for me, when I didn't ride for 3 or 4 weeks, that's the first thing I found that went is the ability to feel how quickly it would take me to get in and out of a hole. And the last thing you want is to be a little late getting there and the door shut on you. So, I quit taking so much time off in one chunk as I reached into my 40s.
Is that true about the clock in the head that all the great jockeys like yourself have, that you kind of know the timing of the race with obviously ever not having the benefit of catching a glance at the tote board?
Yeah. I mean, it is true, but it's not like driving, Kenny. I mean, when you're going 55 or 65, you do it so much, you kind of know what it feels like. You pass things and you kind of get a feel from how quickly you pass things on the side of the road, how fast you're going, when you're going about 80. So it's kind of the same thing with jockeys. Once you do it so many times, you kind of have an idea how quickly you're passing poles, how fast you're going.
And having the pleasure of not only watching Jerry Bailey ride, but being in a car that he was driving, he has perfect timing. And you can make those moves. And you're a little bit like an Andretti riding with you, by the way. You only need that one opening and you're there.
I can't get that out of me. And I forget sometimes when people are following me that they are back there, and I just keep going to the next open hole,
That's why I always try to get in the car with you, not the car trailing you.
It's a bad habit. Doesn't die easy.
I tell you what, I've noticed about you and any world-class athlete that I've had the pleasure to be around and cover or work with or whatever over the years, that reflex thing, you got it or you don't have it. And when you've got those reflexes, I think it carries over in anything. You probably could play a video game better than most people.
Yeah, some days I wonder about that on the golf course. Some days are better than others, but it's all fun.
How's the golf game?
I shot an 80 today, and it's amazing. One stroke. 79 sounds so much better than 80.
Yeah.
You know, just that 1 3-foot putt I missed. But it was fun. I had fun, and I always do. And it's the one thing that gives me that competition that I had when I rode.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of need that. I play 3 or 4 days a week when I'm not working. So it's important to me.
Who's the best jockey golfers out there? I guess Nakatani's pretty good.
Well, I never played with him. I heard he was pretty good. I heard McCarron was pretty good. I didn't play with him. Robbie Alvarado, and I played with him. He's good. Garrett Gomez, God rest his soul, he was really good. And I had fun playing with those two guys. Yeah, they were really good golfers.
Is there a correlation? Because it seems like baseball players, jockeys, hockey players are pretty good golfers, and maybe not so much football and basketball guys.
It seems like hockey players. I played with a bunch of them, and they're really good. And I guess it's the same motion, a shoulder turn with the stick and the puck, a hand-eye. I don't know why jockeys are particularly good. Maybe they're not. There's just a few that I know that are. But the hockey players seem to hit it a ton, a long way, and they seem to be pretty good as a whole.
I think it's probably that eye-hand thing. I don't know. You guys,
yeah,
baseball,
Olczyk,
hockey, really?
Eddie Olczyk, who's on our show, he doesn't play that much. I think he got into the horses, and so that takes up a lot of his time. But the few conversations we had, he was pretty darn good for not playing a lot.
Yeah, he would be. If I imagine when you play with Eddie, in between the holes, he's like reading the form.
Or he'd be on his phone betting, remotely, of course.
Yeah, he would. We're talking with Hall of Fame jockey Jerry Bailey, who I have the pleasure of working with for NBC and had the pleasure of interviewing many times. And it's funny to me now, your son Justin has just graduated law school, and I can remember you holding him in your arms when I was doing interviews with you back in ESPN days, like in 97, 98.
Yeah, we packed him around about every place we went, until he got so far into school that he really couldn't make all those shows. But it was funny because I put him on a pony. I don't know, he was 4 or 5 years old, and he rode around the barn area on a pony, but he didn't really like it. Didn't seem to, never followed up on it. But somebody interviewed him, could have been you, I don't know.
I think so.
And asked him if he wanted to be a jockey, and he was like 5 or 6 years old. He said, "No, I want to be an owner."
Yeah,
so I think he had it right from an early age.
Follow the money, right?
Yeah.
Well, it's also good to have a lawyer in the family, Jerry.
It is. I don't seem to need one so much at my age,
Right.
but transactional stuff, it's sure handy to have. But he works in his office is right downtown Fort Lauderdale, so he's not far from us. He just bought an apartment, so he won't be living too far from us. So yeah, he's got things going on. He's all right. Justin's got a lot of blue sky in front of him.
And rightfully so. And let me ask you, for a young jockey starting out, do you remember like when you were starting out, was it tough to get an agent? Was it tough to get maybe not legal advice, but like financial advice, how to manage things and, how to go forward before you become an established jockey like you did?
Kenny, I was just so focused on writing. I didn't pay attention to any of this stuff. I wish I would have. I didn't start really paying attention really till I quit drinking, which was halfway through my career. But I didn't make a lot of money until then, obviously so, because I was an alcoholic, still am. But it seemed like when I stopped drinking, I started focusing on not only my riding, but everything else around me. And it's probably fortunate for me because I did start making a lot of money then, and I was able to make, rash decisions. And I didn't really have anybody to lean on. I just bought a lot of real estate. And that's what I think is missing from these guys that are coming up now. If they don't have somebody they can trust and lean on, because a lot of these guys like the Ortiz brothers, they started making huge amounts of money right off the bat. So they don't have anybody per se except their agent that lines up their mounts on the horses. And typically, I'm generalizing, but jockeys aren't formally educated past high school usually, and their agents typically are not either, because they're a product of our game, which you get into at an early age, and most jockeys and then agents don't really go through formal education past high school. So it's hard to lean on somebody that really is formally educated, that knows the ins and outs financially, especially tax situations. So it's the rare one that finds somebody they can trust, that makes a lot of money early in our game, that does the right things with it.
Jerry Bailey's been an inspiration for a lot of young jockeys. You have freely talked about your battle with alcohol, and I think that a lot of jockeys come to you for advice. I know they do. You don't talk about it a lot, but, that it's good to have someone who is as bold as you are and as candid as you are, to let them know about the pitfalls out there and things that could deter a career if you don't grab a hold of it.
Kenny, it's funny you mentioned that, because in actuality, just 2 or 3 guys have ever reached out to me for advice on anything.
Really?
And yeah, and I think that jockeys are missing a great opportunity by not having some kind of coach. And let me put it to you this way. Even Tiger Woods has a coach, a swing coach.
Yeah.
The greatest baseball player, Alex Rodriguez, he had a swing. I mean, every major athlete that we have, and we know, no matter how good they are, have some type of coach, and jockeys typically don't. There's one that did. His name's John Velasquez, and his agent, Angel Cordero, was one of the greatest riders ever, and obviously he was his coach. And so it's no coincidence that John Velasquez won more purse money than any rider in history. So that shows you the benefit of having a coach for a rider, yet it doesn't seem like any of these guys reach out for one.
That amazes me, because I've had guys say to me how much they admire you. I thought that they were coming to you on a regular basis saying, Jerry, can you help me with this? Can you give me advice? I really, truly did.
It's just once in a while, Kenny, and it's what even amazes me more is that owners don't reach out in big spots. I mean, how often as an owner, do you reach the Kentucky Derby?
Right.
Very rarely. And why they wouldn't reach out to retired riders that really have no axe in the game and try and pick their brains and help coach their jockey up a little bit is beyond me, because they might not ever have a chance at it again. It just amazed me that doesn't happen much.
Wow. I learn something new every day, and this is one of them. I really thought that people would reach out more, as we are now with the great Jerry Bailey. More with Jerry when we come back here on the Horse Racing Show. Welcome back to the Horse Racing Show. Thank you for being with us. Delighted to have my friend, Hall of Fame jockey and NBC broadcaster Jerry Bailey, who brought up an excellent point, and I did not know this all the time around this sport. You think I would? I think there's a lot of us that cover the sport, Jerry, that did not know what we were talking about a few minutes ago, how few jockeys, few owners reach out to the retired riders like yourself or McCarran or whoever it might be and say, hey, we'd like a little advice on this, which, you would do with anybody. I mean, we talk about how we're going to approach stories sometimes on the Kentucky Derby coverage.
Yeah. I mean, and maybe they reach out to other guys, but, my own personal experience, it very rarely has it ever happened. Now, in the last couple of 3 years, I've had young riders come to me occasionally, and I'm glad to just go over big races with them and share thoughts. But I do this sometimes for major racing international people when they come over for the Breeders' Cup. But, as far as riders on a day-to-day basis on big races, big weeks, I haven't had the requests.
You will now after this show.
Which is fine, Kenny. I wouldn't charge them anyway. But it's just curious to me.
Wow, because I ask you stuff when I get ready to do some interviews, don't I? I say, hey, what do you think about this guy? It's common sense. I look around the room, I say, how many Hall of Fame jockeys am I working with on this show today? Oh, there's Jerry. It's pretty common sense.
What's great about what we do together, though, Kenny, is Randy Moss is really knowledgeable, as you know.
Oh,
you
yeah.
are, and we kind of put our heads together, and we want to make sure as a team that it gets in the show. It doesn't matter who it comes from or who says it. It's just we want to make sure the right stuff, the content is in there, and everybody pitches in, it seems like, on our shows, which is very great and very unique. It's kind of like a family on NBC.
It really is rare. I tell people that in other sports it's that I've covered, it's not necessarily everybody in it for themselves, but the teamwork is not there. You're exactly right. And I think a lot of it comes from the years of knowing you and knowing Randy, and we've all known each other for more than 2 or 3 shows,
You know why? To me, Kenny, is everybody works of the people that we've mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you got somebody coming in there slacking and just wants our ideas and stuff, that's a different story. But of the major players that worked, together with us in there, everybody works, and we know that they work. So it's not like they're trying to just pick your brain and being lazy. It's just that we want to get all the information out there. So those that work at their craft, and most of us in there do,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think any of us mind sharing our thoughts and ideas, just so as long as it gets in the show.
Any jockey ever come to you or our trainer come to you afterwards and say, I think you were a little critical on me today?
They have not. I mean, they might say it to somebody else. Nobody's ever said it to me. But I will tell you that I will take guys off the hook as often as I will point out things they did wrong.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people just say, oh, he didn't move when he was supposed to. Yeah, but there's a lot of things that might have happened that precluded him from moving, or there was too many bad things that would happen had he moved that soon, or whatever. But I think I'm pretty fair in terms of taking the heat off guys as well as putting it on them if I think they did something wrong.
Talking with Hall of Famer Jerry Bailey, who I imagine heard a thing or two when you were riding in New York, because the fans there, it's never the trainer or the conditioning or anything else. It's your fault if you lose.
Oh, you got to have such Teflon skin, because New York especially. Listen, Keeneland, they cheer you when you lose, but yeah. New York, you do hear it. I like the fans in New York. I love them, actually.
Oh, me too.
Because they're great when you win, but they will definitely let you know when they think you've made a mistake.
They've said things to me, and I'm just walking through.
But here's the thing, and it wasn't just me. It's anybody that's very successful.
Right.
They kind of have a tendency to overbet you. So your horse is 5-1, and because you're riding him and you're doing well and you're kind of the hot rider, they make you 5-2. And then when the horse runs like he's 5-1, like he's supposed to, they get mad at you. So it's funny how the fans' minds work.
Jerry, I don't think there's ever going to be a year. I hope there's never a year in horse racing like we have just experienced as we get ready to go into 2020. Your take on the whole situation and the new coalition that they're putting together, all these track leaders are trying to come up with ideas. To me, I think they should have you and I don't know, get Baffert and Pletcher, get some of the guys that have done it in the sport, are still doing it in the sport, Velasquez maybe, and bring them in on a panel as well to share their ideas. That's my take on it. What do you think about that?
Well, look, let's start with the year, and some weird things happened. We had the first DQ ever in the Derby, at least on track DQ.
Right.
And then we had the horse loses rider in the Preakness.
Yeah.
It was pretty wild. But to your point about this new coalition, and they formed it because we've had so many injuries and fatalities in our sport, and it's been a tough year. It has, and we need to do better. Look, this same kind of thing happened in New York in 2012, and I was part of a task force with some really bright people. Mary Scolay, who's the veterinary director in the state of Kentucky, Scott Palmer, Dr. Scott Palmer, who's the veterinarian and the head of the medical directory in New York for the New York Racing Association, and Alan Foreman, who's an attorney in our sport and a brilliant man. Mm-hmm. And we collectively came up with a laundry list of recommendations and prohibitions that New York implemented, and they cut their catastrophic breakdown rate in half in the next year, and it's pretty well stayed there. I think California, for whatever reason, didn't get to what was causing the problem. They were trying to change a bunch of things, but I don't know that they did enough research to see what was actually causing the problems that caused the breakdowns. So it wasn't a surprise to me that it didn't get better to the extent that it did in New York, some 7 years ago. I think that we do need to get rid of a lot of the drugs, if not all of them, that we can in this sport. I think we need to use the whip a lot less, if not get rid of it altogether. And I've said this a couple times, and I had a lot of pushback from trainers, Hall of Fame trainers, from jockeys. And I get it. I mean, I didn't think like this when I rode. I was not, I was an overuser of the whip myself. So I get that, and I'll admit that freely. But I think sitting across the fence from our side now, And it doesn't hurt the horses if used correctly, but it just looks bad, Kenny. I mean, it just
Oh, the
we
optics
say
are
we tell,
terrible. I know.
yeah, we tell people that these horses are bred to run, which they are, and they love to run, which they do, but it just kind of looks bad, when the jockeys are pounding, especially when it's not necessary, when guys are 6 or 8 lengths in front and they're still hitting a horse. So yeah, I think we can do better in a lot of areas, and I hope we do.
I think, like you said, the optics, Jerry, of it all, as we know, sadly in this sport, there's going to be fatalities. I think it's maybe like 3 or 4 horses per 1,000 right training or something like that. And because I think people look at horses almost like they look at their pet dog. Most people, even if they don't like horse racing, have a fondness for horses. Maybe it's because of watching John Wayne movies or whatever. Really, horses are kind of special animals to Americans, I think. But, I think that sometimes it gets not overblown, but sometimes the industry needs to jump in quicker, in my opinion.
Well, Kenny, it's horse racing is athletics. It's an athletic endeavor, but done with horses. Okay, so every athletic endeavor that we see across the sports spectrum has injuries. I mean, that's the nature of sports. You get injured. Now, most of our injuries in horse racing are not catastrophic. That's just the truth. Most of them aren't. But the ones that are, they're fatal because we can't immobilize horses when they break their leg like we can a human being. It's just not possible because of the way horses are made. They need to keep circulation on all 3 other feet, some circulation on the injured limb. So they don't recover from those like a human being can. So when they're bad, they're fatal, unlike human beings and all the other sports we see. So that's the biggest difference.
And, I think that one thing racing might have learned this year is to get ahead of itself a little bit in the public relations department, Jerry, and start addressing the issues and being more proactive than reactive.
No, I agree. I mean, we can make our tracks a little safer, I think. Look at we maybe we need to race a little less. Seems like we're running horses that's the biggest cause of these catastrophic breakdowns is running horses with pre-existing injuries. So maybe we have to have a little more scrutiny on the horses that we do run, but we can do better, and we should.
And we'll close on a positive note that Jerry Bailey shoots in the 70s regularly, and a big year in 2020 coming up, maybe happy times and maybe some outstanding horses to cheer for.
It'll be fun, Kenny. The Derby season is right around the corner, and it's always fun.
Jerry, always great to talk to you. Thanks so much for being on, and Merry Christmas to you and Susie and Justin.
Okay, thanks, Kenny. Be well, buddy. Merry Christmas.
All right, same here. The great jockey Jerry Bailey, the Hall of Famer and NBC Sports announcer. More on the Horse Racing Show right after this. Welcome back to the Horse Racing Show. I'm Kenny Rice. Thanks for tuning in. This is episode 49 if you're keeping score. You can listen to us on The Ville in Louisville, WVLK in Lexington. We've been downloaded in 22 countries. We're on iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Google Play, and iTunes. And a man who is all over the place just like we are. He has traveled the globe as a producer, a director. He's worked with ESPN and NBC, and our friendship goes way back. Mr. Billy Rapaport joins us. Hello, Billy. Welcome in.
Kenny, good morning. Great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we do go back. I think our first thing we did together was like the 82 Hambletonian.
I think it was. It was either it was that or it was the caveman Olympics. I wasn't sure which one we did first, to be honest with you.
I remember.
We do go back.
Remember, you and I told Ben Hur. We said, "Listen, that chariot. When you get in that thing, just drive it."
Exactly. I think if I recall correctly, you did the post-race interview with him.
I did the post-race interview. I said, "Way to go, Ben Hur." I didn't know if it was Ben and Hur. If I called him Mr. Hur, that sounded weird. But anyway,
those horse racing names, they can always get confusing at times. Ask our friend Tom Durkin, he'll tell you.
Oh, and he's been a great friend of ours. We've had a lot of fun over the years. One of my most fun times was when, and Billy put all this together, it was the Breeders' Cup news feed. And I'll sum it up quickly, but he's the creator of it, so I'll let him tell you more about it. What it was is we'd do a series of stories throughout the week. The other reporter was our friend Bob Newmeyer. And so Bob and I would do these stories, and we'd put them up, and if a TV station wanted to use them, they could to help promote horse racing because, as Billy well knows and is known for a long time, You get outside of pockets like, maybe Kentucky, Maryland, Florida, Louisiana, certain parts of California, it's hard to sell horse racing in mid-America. But you did.
Well, we certainly tried. And I think when we started with that, Kenny, with the Breeders' Cup newsfeed, it really came off of, in 1984, I brought the Olympic torch from New York to Los Angeles for the Summer Games and produced and directed all that coverage across the country. And what we came to realize was that stations were not going to come out, 500 miles before the torch came to their community and shoot videos. So we said, we got to provide it to them. We got to give it to them so they can build an anticipation and a sense of excitement. And then, they'll do their own thing when clearly we come local. So we kind of took that model for horse racing when I started working for an agency in New York by the name of SMTI, and they were really the first Breeders' Cup agency. A guy by the name of Mike Leadus and Mike Traeger with John, the great John Nehru and John Gaines, put this whole thing together. And I said to them when they brought me on, I said, guys, I've got an idea, because my sense is that people, as you point out, Kenny, don't know horse racing. And now Breeders' Cup was only a year old at the time, and we need to, I hate to say it this way, but spoon feed it to them. We need to pick out the best stories, and what we really need to do is we need to get the best possible broadcasters that we can find who are real television news reporters, sports reporters who also know racing. And clearly you, Kenny, and Bob Newmar are the two best in the country. And so we were fortunate enough to have you all a part of it. And what really, and you know how this always works. When they say it's not about the money, it's about the money.
Yeah.
We gave it away for free. So what we did is, we packaged these stories. We told the great stories that were surrounding the Breeders' Cup, built up the excitement leading into the week, and we gave it to every station for free in the country. And they had it so easy, we literally sent them the script so that they could take your voice out, no disrespect, from the package story and put their own reporter in the story with everything already done for them. And that was really the first time that anything like that had been done in sports, where we created content, we fed it to local television stations, sports departments, we gave it to them for free, and in exchange, we got the promotional value of building the Breeders' Cup interest, the audience, and ultimately, hopefully, the television rating. And as they say, the rest is what, 35 years of history or something like that? I can't even remember.
Yeah, something like that. It goes, and it's been amazing. We're talking with Billy Rapaport, producer, director. I've been a great friend of mine for years. We've worked together from harness racing to thoroughbred racing. And, Billy, so much of it, like you just said, you almost still have to spoon feed. It's not like the sport has grown that much outside of the areas where it's already been popular, and I just think maybe that's just the niche of the sport. I don't think it's a knock on the sport.
No, I don't think it's a knock on the sport at all. I think you're right. I think there are places in the country where the horse matters more, the sport matters more, and clearly that's part of the equation. I do think, however, that the big stories, the ones that appeal to the mass audiences, still have great value and can make horse racing, thoroughbred racing most of the time, although harness racing can have it a little bit here and there, cross out and over into the sort of the general conversation of the country. And you see that clearly with the Triple Crown on the line. That's always going to be the case. But some horses just capture people differently, and I think those are the ones that can sort of be the ones that drive non-traditional areas as well as non-traditional horse racing fans to the sport. Now, whether we can keep them, that's really, I think, at the end of the day, and you and I both have talked about this for many, many years, that's really sort of the X in the equation, right? I mean, we really have to figure out how to keep them once we give them a great story like Justified. Or, I mean, look at Smarty Jones. Look at what Smarty Jones did to this country. I mean, it was unbelievable, beyond tremendous. It was unbelievable. And you and I were blessed to be able to be there. Of course, he didn't win, but to be along for that ride. And when you see 120,000 people at Belmont, and it's happening, there's an energy about thoroughbred racing and those types of events that it really is unequaled in my opinion. I think it's when that gate blows open on Derby Day, there's no energy like that in any sport or anything I've ever done in my career, and that's including championship boxing, the Olympics, as you know, Super Bowls. I mean, so for me, The sport has it inherently. We just gotta keep looking for the good stories, and I think that's something that you do a great job of, and I clearly try to do as good a job as I can do in that regard as well.
And Billy has one of the toughest jobs in handling and whipping everybody into shape in the winner's circle, which you would think would be easy, but it's not. Everybody wants to get in the picture. Photographers want to come in there and take the picture, and they step in front of videographers, and it can be ugly, but nobody wrangles it all better than Billy Rapaport.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, Kenny. Again, you and I have been very fortunate to be in places that people would, it would be not forget a bucket list. They would give anything to be the places that you and I get to go to on a fairly regular basis. And yes, a winner's circle at the Kentucky Derby is definitely on the list, and any Triple Crown race for that matter. Look, the key in those things. I say this to everybody. My main job, and clearly it's television, quote unquote, but my real job is to keep everybody safe. You have a very unique situation going on here. You have a 1,200-pound animal who's just raced however the distance is. You have lots of people clearly who want to be part of something, whether they should be or shouldn't be, whether they're the media or whether they're the part of the winning connections or think they are. As you know, the sport has increased differently in that with the amount of syndicates that we have and the group ownership. It's a lot different than it was when it was just Mr. Phipps or Mr. Oxley or somebody like that, and you didn't have a whole lot of others sort of involved in the moment, if you will. So it was easy to sort of understand who should be there and who shouldn't be there. In the current environment, it can be very chaotic, obviously, and it can be extremely difficult. But you do the best you can to keep everybody safe, human and equine, and you make the picture and you tell the story and hope, as I say, for everybody's well-being. That's the key for me.
We're talking with Billy Rapaport, producer, director, all-around great guy. We're going to have more stories when we come back. Stay with us here on The Horse Racing Show. Welcome back to The Horse Racing Show. I'm Kenny Rice. Thank you for tuning in again this week. Billy Rapaport is our guest. He is a producer, director with NBC, with ESPN. He has covered Olympics and Super Bowls as well as all the major horse races. And I think that's always good, Billy. That's kind of the perspective I've come from, is I think covering other sports helps you cover horse racing. And most of the great writers that I know cover other things than horse racing.
Well, I think some of the best writers sports writers ever love to cover horse racing. I mean, how far back do you want to take it?
Uncle Grantland. No, he wasn't my uncle. Grantland Rice is not my uncle.
Well, but certainly a great example, right?
Yeah, Red Smith. I mean, my goodness, yeah.
And even those within the sport, Joe Hirsch. I mean, some of these are legendary writers. I mean, sports writers, right? Yeah. So in the day, all the great sports writers wanted to be around horse racing because that's where the best stories were. That's where the action was. As you and I both know, there wasn't even a football team in Los Angeles for a real long time, but there was clearly horse racing there. And I think that great writers love great stories, clearly, and I would suggest that horse racing probably has the best stories that you can have. And part of that may be because of the horse itself. Clearly they can't talk, and so I think that kind of allows us to, as storytellers, to sort of put them in a different way, and to appreciate them and the characters around the game. I mean, goodness gracious, some of the greatest, most colorful people in all the sports have always been around thoroughbred racing, and I think that's, again, why it's such a great sport, and we're given the chance to tell some of those stories. So you would think that more people would want, as being a sports writer today, to cover thoroughbred racing, just, again, for all the previously mentioned reasons. But with the NFL and the relative nature of bigness, as my old boss used to say, of like the NBA and everything else, horse racing just takes a back seat, and guys are not coming out of college, except maybe in certain areas, as we spoke about earlier, and saying, I want to go, be the horse racing writer for. Well, guess what? Unfortunately, The New York Post doesn't have a horse racing writer anymore. The New York Daily News doesn't have a horse racing writer anymore.
And you thought that would never happen. That would never happen in New York, I thought.
Are you kidding me?
I know.
In a million years, it would never happen.
Not in New York.
But and so it's disappointing, clearly, to see that and not to see the good young writers wanting to be part of that. But we don't give them the platform, at least in the traditional media. Obviously, in the interweb, as I like to call it, and all other things like that, face tweet, call it what you will. From my standpoint, that's obviously the place where now more voices can be heard, that are interested in good writers within the sport. But it's just lost its sort of traditional front page sports position. Unless, again, as I said earlier, you've got a major situation going on, a Triple Crown on the line, et cetera, et cetera.
Billy Rapaport does not only horse racing, but is a Broadway. You have been a producer. You have been a director of Broadway, including a tribute to the Rascals, one of the great rock groups. I just thought
one of the greatest rock groups ever, Kenny.
I know.
mean, they really, people, this is a band, and I was fortunate enough to do this show on Broadway with Stephen Van Zandt, who, played Silvio in The Sopranos. I think everybody knows he's Bruce Springsteen's guitar player in the E Street Band, an incredibly talented guy and a good friend. And he approached me about this, and this was the band that he actually inducted them into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, which led to David Chase discovering him as a potential actor to do The Sopranos, but that's another story for another show. And so basically, Stephen said to me, these guys, their music. Now, they were a little before my time. So, but I knew Groovin' and Good Lovin' and How Can I Be Sure and People Gotta Be Free and all these. And I started listening to the music and I was like, oh my gosh, I do know all this music. And these guys are amazing. Well, Kenny, they hadn't played together in 40 years because of and obviously an iceberg that developed in the band's world 40 years previously, and Stephen put them back together. The four original guys, Eddie Brigatti, the lead singer, who sang those great songs. They call him the Blue-Eyed Soul Man, and then you have Dino Danelli, the great drummer, who really was one of the greatest drummers of all time. Felix Cavalieri, who is a great keyboard player and obviously very well known, and Gene Cornish, the guitar player. Well, these four guys were not only still living, but they were still performing independently. And Stephen put them back together on Broadway. And I got to tell you, we did a show about their lives. They all played. We did a film about them, throughout the show. It was kind of a mixed media thing. But to watch people from a certain era who never thought they'd see these guys ever alive again, let alone playing on a Broadway stage together again, it was really an amazing experience. And again, you and I have been very fortunate to be in places that just, you kind of got to pinch yourself sometimes.
Right.
And that was definitely one of those pinch yourself moments, to be standing on the boards of Broadway, at the Richard Rodgers Theater. And after we closed, Hamilton replaced us. So I feel pretty good about the boards that we were on. And it was just cool experience, and clearly a lot different than the things that I have done, that you know about or that most people know about. But it's certainly it's all about storytelling, right? And that's what we try to be good at. And
it is.
We felt we did a great job.
And that's why I like this show. Honestly, because having guests like you on, because we have talked about a variety of subjects. Last week we had Michael Blowen on from Old Friends Farm, who was a Boston Globe, as you know, movie critic. He was talking about his friendship with Jack Nicholson. And another reason that I always like to talk to you is you and my dad Reginald are the only two people left on the planet, I believe, that have a flip phone.
Well, and I'm coming to you live from today, Kenny.
And it sounds just like you're here. Yeah.
It's working clearly, right? I'm a bit of a Luddite and a proud one. I just never kind of got into it. Part of it is it does fit in my pocket a lot better when I am in the winter circle running around trying to, keep herding the cats and get everybody sort of together, because it drops in there as opposed to, a flat phone that could pop out clearly. I have, dare I say, never butt dialed anybody with my flip phone, and a total impossibility, which I think most people now can say they've done once or twice, maybe and shouldn't have.
Right.
But at the end of the day, your father and I are very much alike in many ways, and you know how much I love him and I think he's like the greatest guy ever. And clearly, the flip phones are definitely another example of how he and I are simpatico. But you know, I have to say, Kenny, he and I are not the only ones. There now, I can't speak to this being 100% true because I haven't seen it with my eyes. It's all some of them with my eyes, but some of it may not be current.
Yes.
But there are a few famous flip phoners, and I'm going to list them for you, and you know some of them.
I do.
Last time I heard Andrew Luck, flip phoner.
Right.
Last time I heard Peyton Manning, flip phoner.
Yes.
Bob Costas, as you know, long-time,
flip phoner.
very proud flip phoner.
Yes.
And if I'm not mistaken, yes, my friend Bill Murray would be the other member of the Flip Phone 5, which now with your dad makes 6. So we're very excited to have him as part of the club.
I just have a few minutes, about a minute to go here, but I also want to ask about your horse riding expertise now with your lovely wife Elizabeth.
Kenny.
You're not just a guy that covers this. You ride horses now. Couldn't believe it.
Well, I think that you may have overstated it, but I have gotten up on a horse for the first time in my entire life this past September for my wife's 50th birthday. I promised her that I would potentially give it a shot. She wanted to be on a horse for her 50th birthday because, as you know, I have always said, she rides him, I bet him. You know what I mean? So I wanted to be able to kind of reverse that a little bit and say, I don't just bet him anymore. And we went out to a place out in Montana, and I did get up on a horse. It was actually an amazing experience. And I think being around horses for so many years, I was very comfortable around them, but I had never been astride, as they say, right? So I had never been on top of one. I remember telling her, well, babe, I'll be able to figure this out. Just as long as there's somebody out there to give me a leg up, I'll be able to. She goes, are you kidding me? This is trail riding. This isn't a racetrack. There's a trainer there that you can put your foot out there and they can leg you up onto the horse. No, you're going to put you on this little ladder and you're going to have to climb up on it. Well, she's got video evidence of it, and I really enjoyed it. And I have to tell you, I totally get it, and I would totally do it again. When I don't know, but I really enjoyed the experience, and I was happy that I could make my wife happy, and you know that's a good thing.
Well, you make a lot of people happy, Billy. I love our friendship, love you, and thank you for being on with me.
Thank you, Kenny. It was great to be with you as always, and I too love our friendship and all the great moments we've shared together, and look forward to many more.
We will definitely have many more, and more to come here. After Mr. Rapaport has to depart, we'll still have a little bit of show left here. Stay with us on the Horse Racing Show. Welcome back to the Horse Racing Show. Merry Christmas. Happy Hanukkah. We get ready for the new year. We thank you all for your support this year. And how many horse racing shows are you ever going to hear that talk about the Rascals? Thomas Kenny is going to pull out his guitar that he just got for Christmas. Scott Hall, you got your
a guitar for Christmas?
Oh, wait. Never mind. Maybe you didn't, Thomas. Forget it. Ben, that keyboard you wanted for Christmas?
Oh, I thought it was a tambourine.
Oh, well, I knew it was one or the other. You know, Scott, we could get the band back together.
We literally could. We have the technology, man. We could do that.
You know, that's a possibility.
Yeah.
For future show.
Yeah. We're planning out next
Kind of
year,
ruined your
so
Christmas,
you know.
didn't I, Thomas?
That depends on what kind of guitar it is, I guess.
No, see, maybe it could turn out for the best. It could turn out for the best. Some great insight today from Jerry Bailey. I appreciate always catching up with him, and Billy Rapaport, who did direct the Rascals with Steven Van Zandt when they got them back together. And it's just fun to talk about things that are not always horse-related, because so many people in the horse industry, as we heard with Michael Blowen a couple of weeks ago, you know, it's just different. You don't know which direction, you know, who's going to come into the horse racing business. That's what always keeps it interesting. We're going to keep it very interesting next week. It'll be our 50th episode of the Horse Racing Show. And two longtime friends of mine, great writers, Lenny Schulman is going to be with us, and Evan Hammonds. They're with the Blood Horse, and we're going to take a look back at 2019 and maybe some thoughts on 2020. Think you guys are ready for that? So consider us, it'll be like Dick Clark meets Ryan Seacrest and jumps on a horse next week. That will be the Horse Racing Show as we go into 2020 at full speed.
I can't wait.
All right.
We're ready.
Okay, me too. Thank you, Scott Hall, Ben Chaffins, Thomas Kenny. Merry Christmas to you all, and to all a good night. Until we talk again next week, I'm Kenny Rice. Thanks for tuning in.